The most powerful signals of a predator is someone who can't take no for an answer. He says in here, no is a word that must never be negotiated because the person who chooses not to hear it is trying to control you. He goes on to say, declining to hear no is a signal that someone is either seeking control or refusing to relinquish it. Never, ever relent on the issue no. He goes on to say, another common response that serves the criminal is to negotiate. Remember that no is a complete sentence. Gavin goes on to talk about the interview, which is where a predator or other criminal or other abuser goes on to test your ability to say no. You know, maybe they offer you help. Like, you know, at the very beginning of this book, he's writing a scene about a woman who ends up getting raped. And, you know, she's walking up to her apartment and she's juggling a bunch of groceries and maybe the bag breaks or something and they spill. And some guy was waiting in the hallway and he's all charming and sweet and helpful and offering her help with the groceries. And at first she says, no, I got it. And then he's like, oh, come on, let me help you. And so he keeps negotiating with her and she keeps negotiating with him until she ends up allowing him up to her apartment, and that's where the crime happens. So that's the interview selection process with narcissistic abuse. They're going to test you and little things. They're going to see, can you say no? They're going to see, can you enforce your boundary of no when they push and push against you? So hold your boundary of no. Just say no when you need to say no. One thing that I recommend to a lot of clients is to take a Krav Maga class. It's like a self-defense class. It's like all day Saturday. Typically, I think these are run for women. There might be some for men as well.
The House commemorates the centenary of the death of Emily Davidson.
Because even though they're teaching you physical self-defense, the first several hours of that class are all about using your voice, and they're all about saying no and getting comfortable saying no. And they teach
for women. Mr. Speaker, while I may be dubious of the company she speaks, the honourable member is more deserving of the honour of seconding today's loyal address. Mr. Speaker, there has never been such a farce as a government with a majority of minus 45 and a 100% record of defeat in the House of Commons, setting out a legislative agenda they know cannot be delivered in this Parliament. And, honourable members, heckles about a general election. I said to the been such a farce as a government with a majority of minus 45 and a 100% record of defeat in the House of Commons, setting out a legislative agenda they know cannot be delivered in this Parliament. And, honourable members, and in that Queen's speech, Labour will put forward the most radical and people-focused programme in modern times. A once-in-a-generation chance to rebuild and let the people decide on Brexit, build an economy that works for all, rebuild our public services that support everyone, tackle the climate emergency, and reset our global role to one based on peace and human rights.
Gentlemen, for giving way. The Prime Minister gave the right honourable gentleman the opportunity of having a general election tomorrow.
Yeah. Quite simply, Mr. Speaker, because we don't trust the Prime Minister.
Oh, one of them got through. Look at that.
Quite simply, Mr. Speaker, because we don't trust the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, of workers and businesses. That means including a new customs union, a close single market relationship, and guarantees
that opportunity when he's been calling for it all the time.
Quite simply, Mr. Speaker, because we don't trust the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker.
Okay, 2 of them got through, but you guys have seen this. It's ridiculous. I go through one video after another, and they're not allowed to be. Okay, we update. Let's see what's going on. So 2 of them got through. Let's see if the Washington
Guarantees of workers' rights, consumer standards, and environmental protection. And if I may say so, guarantees that the Good Friday Agreement will not be damaged or undermined in any way. A withdrawal agreement was announced, but we don't know yet if the government has done a deal. The government has done a deal. What we are sure of is its own figures. The government's own figures suggest a free trade agreement approach will cause a near 7% hit to our economy. While for many people, Mr. Speaker, the economy of this country is fundamentally weak. Since 2010,
So you can see the obvious
fellow citizens
inability for me to like the video.
Fewer people
Disappears.
can afford their own home.
Same topic. Not one of them is being allowed to be liked. Well, that's actually 2 of them got through, but they didn't show up.
In poverty.
So that's weird.
More children in the South Coast, where last year food banks, families without a home to call their own, and more people, fellow citizens, sleep.
And 2 of them got through.
1,453 meals. And 1 in 7 people in that town live in fuel poverty. Falling, and the economy contracted last month. At the weekend, Mr. Speaker, I was in Hastings on the south.
The challenges now faced by rising child poverty, compounded by mental health issues that young people face. Compounded by the rising special educational needs,
Almost a lost generation. Children going to school, understaffed schools, very few teaching assistants, head of bad housing.
See, not getting through.
Head teachers going out with a begging bowl to parents to try to match the school budget. So, will the Prime Minister match Labour's commitments to
It's just not going through.
of bad housing and of stress and worry about ditch the bedroom tax, scrap the 2-child limit and the disgusting rape clause, and end punitive sanctions in the benefit system? Whilst, Mr. Speaker, we welcome the pass on tips to their workers, something the Labour and trade union movement has long campaigned for.
So these are the only ones that are allowed to come through. I've clicked on all the other ones, and only those 2 came through. Also, it didn't show up that those 2 were liked, but they do come up in my liked playlist, so they must have gotten through. I mean, you could see it for yourself, so try this one.
Brilliant speech at the TUC earlier last month. This speech, Mr. Speaker, this Queen's speech today was supposed to herald an end to austerity and a new vision. Instead, it barely begins to unpick the devastating cuts to public services.
I don't think that one.
The National Health Service,
went
yes,
through
we'll give way.
either. Oh, it did. Good news. Okay, something weird's going on though. That's for sure.
This is Mongolia, and we are nada. The only
The devastating cuts to public services. The National Health Service, yes, we'll give way.
I'm grateful to him for giving way. Would he agree that the climate and nature emergencies demand so much more than just the 6 words they were recorded in the speech, and an environment bill that will widely weaken the protections we currently enjoy as members of the EU? And will he join me in calling for a comprehensive Green New Deal to decarbonise the economy by 2030 so we can show we're genuinely serious about the climate crisis?
It's worse because, of course, we're generally serious. People feel that they're being not heard because there's an active worldwide takeover, censorship, the push of an agenda and a narrative, and active repression for truth. I mean, at least 3 of them got through. But let's go back to that one again.
This is Mongolia.
This is
and we
Washington
are
Post.
nada.
So
only
try
company-
again.
I thank the member for that intervention. I am National Health
See it
Service has
disappear?
suffered the longest funding
So
squeeze
Washington
in its
Post
history.
should have gotten
And
through,
life expectancy
but it didn't. The ones that got through are the Guardian News, the UK Parliament, and the RT UK. So the ones from, well, this Washington Post article got through, but that's completely different. Let's try again. Let's try Ripley.
coalition. Mr. Speaker, NHS England has made clear that core treatment targets cannot
See it
be
disappear?
met within the funding settlement offered by the
Maybe
government.
that's because it's live, but I've
They
never
ca-
seen it do that before, and it didn't go through, of course.
They cannot be trusted with the National Health Service. On
Ain't that the
waiting
truth?
list.
And look at all this
those waiting
glitchiness. They
longer
keep
and
cutting it
longer
in and out.
excellent emergency departments. And nearly 34,000 patients who waited over 62 days for cancer. There is an urgent need to restore the nurse bursary so we have the nurses of tomorrow. But if the Prime Minister really wants to defend it, if the Prime Minister, if the...
It's crazy the amount of censorship.
really wants to defend it, if the Prime Minister, if the... Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister really wants to defend the NHS, if the Prime Minister really wants to defend the NHS, he
needs to get rid of this
defend the
censorship.
NHS, he needs to end privatisation. We don't just want... Universal service, free at the point of use. We don't just want tinkering around the edges. We want to bin the Health and Social Care Act and truly end all privatisation within our National Health Service.
And it's the same message across the board. Individual freedoms are being repressed in the name of the state. Or more specifically, the Nazi Fourth Reich's censorship agenda across the world. And it's affecting everything you just saw. I mean, you know, both literally and figuratively, because it's the policy of fascism and repression that I'm labeling Nazi. But it is also a rise.
Calmly and methodically, this gunman planned to kill Jews on their holiest day of worship, Yom Kippur. Dressed like a soldier, wearing a steel helmet, a camera is attached to it. The device transmitting live video to a gaming website. Behind the police cordon is a synagogue, the killer's target, but his plan failed. The synagogue had been packed with dozens of worshippers, saved from attack because the thick entrance doors were locked. The gunman had repeatedly opened fire on the doors. He gave up and then shot randomly.
Now the good news is this one hasn't been removed.
A covered body lying in the foreground here. He went on to a nearby Turkish kebab restaurant to kill again.
And that one got through. Okay, so I'm going to end this video.